Good morning, students, and Jai Hind. Now, today in our study, we shall now concentrate on the topic, particularly the cathedrals, towns, and features of churches. And the second topic we shall try to cover today, that the crisis of 14th century. Understand, students? Now, before that, we have studied well that how the cities and towns emerged. Okay, right from the village economy, gradually the urban economy or the town's economy began because of that people, now the village people required required the exchange of the different communities, understand, communities, and then after the money just the barter system, in a lieu of the barter system, the money system or the money now came and took the place of the transaction, and this now widened the horizontal of the transactions and the trade and commerce system. You understand? So now in the process of the, now we have already seen that the places where the people now gathers for the gathered for the exchange of their goods, understand, exchange of their required commodities, understand, so then after and sold their goods and purchased, this selling and purchasing places, so these kinds of the places where the towns and the urban centers established gradually in the different parts of the Europe. So these kinds of the towns began to be the can be termed as trade towns, understand, or the trade city. Now the moreover the towns where the which and the towns and the cities which emerged around or the and the adjacent area of the religious structures or the churches or the religious structures and the monastery, these kinds of the towns now can be the termed or can be categorized in the religious as or the termed as the religious towns, understand. Now students, and the one thing is that the towns which particularly or exclusively emerged emerged because of the administrative center or administrative seats, understand, those kind of the towns are termed or termed as the administrative cities or the administrative towns, understand. So now today particularly we shall focus our study on the cathedral's town, means a town, a kind of religious town, understand. The town developed, the town grew because because of the religious centers, and later on these as this town enlarged, then after this emerged, this town or church town now emerged as a pilgrim's town, understand, pilgrim's town, the which this kind of the we know that the in Europe every village everywhere, understand, the church had been established for the prayers, understand, or it was the looked after by the bishops, understand, bishops and the clergy, they were the religious authorities of the churches, and they look after the all the religious matters or activities in the towns, and the in that sequence or in that sequence or the in that chain and the course of the establishing the churches, many of the big churches had been established in the Europe, and those churches now emerged as a pilgrims places and the worth to the visit, understand. So students, here we are going to see that, and one thing is that I have already talked to you, as the cities emerged, understand, towns emerged, okay, so now this enables the people began the and became the richer, understand, and people had the money. So particularly one of the ways the rich merchants now spent their money was in the by the making the donation to the churches, as the this trading class now enabled or became richer. That's the trading class was capable of donating the money to the churches, understand, and those monies had been invested in the construction of the big churches, great churches, and as well as the religious purposes. Okay, and further, and we know that from the 12th century, large churches began to be the constructed because these wealthy traders, okay, began started contributing the money to the churches. So the by the since the from the 12th century, okay, big churches, even or also called as cathedrals. Big churches began to be the established, huge churches, and these were the called as the cathedrals, and were being built in the, and particularly this process of the making and the forming and building of the big churches began in the France. First of all, in the France, it was the this was the began. You should remember that the first time from the France and by the Franks, but Christianity began to be the embraced firstly. Understand? Then after the Christianity now is expanded in the England or in the Italian parts. Understand? So now students in the France, right from the 12th century, big churches begins to be the constructed, and because the huge contributions that these churches got and received from the from the rich and the well-to-do merchants. Okay, and further, and now here the different groups of the people contributed to their construction with their, and now moreover, apart from not only the merchants class, the different other different classes and the social segments, understand, they now contributed in the construction of the church in a different way, not only by the money, by the labor, by the materials, or by the money, in a different way. Some now worked and just dedicated the labor, donated the labor service. Some donated the material to be the used in the construction of the churches. Understand? Some and some money. So the cathedrals were the built of the stones, particularly mainly these grand cathedrals were made of the stones as students, and took many years to complete it. And this took the many years to complete it. And moreover, as they were being built, the area around the cathedrals, the all the area around the cathedrals became the more populated. And now I have already mentioned that at the big cathedrals and the churches began to be constructed. Understand? So naturally, the area around the churches, okay, now came in the process of the populated this area, now populated peoples, now different parts of the countryside began like to settle down in this area. Many businessmen or manufacturers or the many kind of the people having the different kind of the occupations now begin to settle down around the churches. Understand? So in this way we see that it is churches, okay, the church and the around the cathedrals or religious city established, began to be established in the Europe students, and the further, and the when they were completed, they became the center of pilgrimage, and these churches became renowned, prominent, understand, and the grand, and what to visit, understand. So these churches became the center of pilgrimage. The people from far away and far flung area begin to now gather there for the watching these grand churches. And students, thus small towns developed around them, and no doubt around this churches, the small towns began to be the developed. Understand? Many kinds of the city and the towns activities started. Okay, the no doubt students, here the cathedrals were the design. Now we shall now focus ourselves on the designs of these cathedrals. Okay, what were the designs? How these were the designed and constructed? For what purpose? What the objective of its design? Every design had its certain objectives behind that. Okay, and moreover, so that the priest voice could be the these churches were designed in the way that the voices of the priest could be the now heard from the far clearly, heard heard from far away. Understand? It should be the and hall where the heard, and the clearly within the hall where the large number of the peoples gathered. And now it was the design in that within the hall, okay, the priest voices could be the clearly reach out in the each nook and corner of the halls, in every part of the halls where the visitors were standing or the sitting. Understand? This was the design in the way. And moreover, so the singing of the monks could be the beautifully. Singing of the monks sounds beautifully. Now the you can say that in a such a ecosystem. Understand? Now worked that these singings of the monks could be the heard very beautifully, sounds very beautifully, and the chiming of the bells, timing of the bells could be the ringing of the bells could people the parade could be the heard over a great distance. Understand? This parade or the ringing of the bells, understand, this could be the heard from the distance places. The people could heard, and then they could, after hearing the bell, they could come to the church to join the congregation. Understand? To join these congregations, they could come from the far away. Understand? This say so that these were the halls were, and the designs in the way that everyone could listen whatever the singing and programs or the speech by the and the sermons delivered by the bishops and the clergy should be the easily listened. Understand? The students, now we can say stained glass were used in the churches in the construction. Stained glass, understand, we are used there now. And for the windows, the church windows, in the church windows stained glass had been the it was the set with the stained glass and the used for windows during the day. Sunlight, in the daylights, sunlight would mark them radiant, mark them the radiant for people inside. Understand? People inside could now mark these windows as a radiant. Radiant light could be the seen. Understand? And the cathedrals. And after the sunset, the light of the candles would have then visible of the people outside. In these window is where now this such a stained glass had been said that he radiant in the daytimes, the radiant light of the sun, understand, would be the visible the people who were in the inside. Understand? And the people could be for them the visible radiant for the people inside. And the cathedrals, or the cathedrals, and after the sunset, the light of candles, understand, flickering within the make the visible people outside. The flickering lights of the candles within the church could be the visible from the people standing on the outside of the church. Understand? This now represented a very luminous and very colorful, or the beautiful dazzling lights. Understand? And the now makes the this structures very attractive. And the word scenery, understand, what scenery was created by these visibles, sunlights and the candle lights at night. Sunlights in the day or candle lights at the night. Understand? So now this now decorated this kind of the decorated the much to this huge structure. And the stained glass windows narrated the story. And one thing was that main features of these stained glass was that now the stories related to the Jesus Christ, or associated with his life had been the depicted and the carved out and the designed in the on the window panes. Understand? Designed on the stained glass window panes. The stories related and the associated with the Jesus Christ had been the just had been depicted that reflects and tells a lot about the Jesus Christ stories or about narrated stories in the Bible through the pictures, and those stories which had been the now stipulated in Bibles. Understand? Those stories, understand, had been now depicted in the windows panes, on the window panes. Understand? The stained glass window panes. So now this was the a story that a knowledge to enhance the religious knowledge, to enhance the visitors, and the more and the became just a eye capturing or a sight capturing a scenario the reflected, and which even by through that pictures even the illiterate could understand, and they could read and they know about the religion and about the stories of the, or they could know the stories of the Bible also. Understand, student? So now this kind of the structure was now constructed in the Cathedrals had the certain features of this. Understand? The now students, let's see. Now we see that the religious town, or now we shall turn to the second topic to be the studied here, the crisis of the 14th century. Understand? Dear students, here the crisis of the 14th century. One thing, so far we have seen that the 11th and the 12th century and 14th century. Now 12th and 13th century, by the early 14th century. Understand? The Europeans century, Europe's economic expansion. Now we have seen that the Europeans, the 14th century, the Europeans' economic expansion slowed down. This was due to the three factors. Now, one thing is that the Europeans' economic growth, which had started after the 11th or the 12th or the 13th century, the European's economy now grew very rapidly. Understand? But again, or by the emergence of the warmer season, by the climatical change, the Europe now got the farmers got the space of for the agriculture in the climatical space in the much space or the time of the agriculture. Understand? But one thing is that, but by the 12th century, again the economy now began to or started slowing down in northern Europe. First of all, we see that by the end of 13th century, warm summers of the previous 300 years, warm summers of the previous 300 years had given way to the bitterly cold summer. Now the cold summer began after the 300 years cold summers, and the seasons for, and then after other changes happened. The season for growing crops were reduced. Now the season for growing crops were reduced by a month, and it became difficult to grow crops on the higher ground, or then after it becomes the difficult to grow the crops on higher grounds. That became by this change of summer winters. Understand? Summer winters, because of that bitter cold summers, this reduced the month of the agriculture. Understand? Now because of the summers, agricultural month had expanded. Understand? But it reduced again. Understand? It means that the time gap the time space, understand, the farmers got reduced, and this now no doubt they hindered in the agricultural system, hinder the growth of the agriculture, growth of the crops, understand. So this caused a impact, and because the difficulties grow the crops higher ground, and this created the growth of the crops in the higher ground, storms, and moreover the other kind of the natural calamities now affected the Europe, began to affect the Europe in the 14th century, and that was the first the storms and the oceanic flood. Storms began to just occurred, oceanic flooding destroying the many now farm states. Many farm states began to be the destroyed by the oceanic storms, which resulted in the less income or the, and as a result, understand, the government less production, or as the less income in the taxes for the government. This reduced the taxes for the government because no agriculture, no tax. Understand? That was the notion of the government and the people, that no agriculture, no tax. Okay, so as the agriculture hindered because of that, and the opportunity offered of the favorable climatic conditions before 13th century, those opportunity which had the nature had now provided the opportunity before the 13th century, had led the large scale reclamation of the land of the forest. Understand? Large scale reclamation of the land and the forest and the pastures for the agriculture. Understand? This now many of the forest lands and the pastures lands had been taken into the cultivables and the arable lands, and but intensive plowing had exhausted the soil, and one thing and one problem also created is that the exhaustive soils, understand, soil despite the practice of the three field rotation crops. Now one thing is that the soil's capacity and the fertility begin to diminish. Understand? Law of diminished was just diminished set, and law of diminished begin to work in the agricultural system, three agricultural field system, in which the more and more lands had been taken into the agriculture, and this now led towards the diminishing of the practices of the land, diminishing of the capacity of the land or the fertility of the land, and because clearance was not accompanied by proper soil conservation, and now this clearance was not accompanied by the proper soil conservation, so the people didn't heed towards the soil conservation. They now blindly or recklessly and continued to extracting the more and more production from the soils, and the ultimately soils capacity began to diminish. Understand? So as a result, the shortage of the pastures reduced. Shortage of the pastures land reduced the number of uh, cattle, and one thing is that as the people now began to take in the 13th century, I am talking about that. The people started taking the pastures land under the cultivations, and they note this just a shortage of the pastures land led the decline in the number and the strength of the cattle wealth. Understand? So this affected the cattle's growth, and population growth was now outstripped resources. One thing is that the population growth was outstripped resources, and the immediate result of was famine. And moreover, the population growth also affected by the natural famine now occurred frequently in the Europe, and because of that, the severe famines hit the Europe between the 1315 to the 1317. These severe famines now followed in the 1320s by a massive cattle deaths. And because of this famine, understand, the massive cattle deaths occurred because of the droughts. Understand, the large scale of the cattle's now, their death tolls went on and became very high. Okay, and now in addition, trade was hit by a severe shortage of the metal money. Severe shortage of the metal money. Now we know that the metal was under in the circulation. Coins were in circulation as a money. Understand? So this circulation of the coins now was affected. Circulation of coins now, no doubt, uh, coins was affected by the shortage of the coin supply. Understand, now this because the shortfall in the output of the silver mines in Austria. Now this, how this affected in the Austria, which now supported the coin supply, the silver supply, and as well as the Serbia. Understand, where the exhausted, their mines exhausted, and the now supply of the silver fallen in the Europe. So as a result, what happened, the pure silver coins now began to be the shortage in the market or in circulation, came into the fall in circulation, and this forced the government, and this scarcity of the silver's metal, in the silver's metal. Now the government reduced the silver content of the, because of the content of the currency. The government reduced the content of the silver in the coins. Much content, it was the diluted, and it was the alloyed or mix it with the cheaper metals. Cheaper metals. Now this was the one of the symbol and the mark of the decline in the economic fall and economic crashes. This was the indicating towards the economic crisis of the economic fall. Understand? And moreover, students, the worst step was yet to come. Another thing is that bubonic plague, the plague, bubonic plague. Understand? That was the struck the severely to the rest of the population in the Europe. Understand? And now rooted or disseminated the rooted the population of the Europe on a large scale. Moreover, we can see that here the worst was the yet to come. Trade expanded in the 13th century and 14th one now, with the expansion of the trade and commerce in 13th and 14th century. Understand? So this now the traders now came into the contact by the ships in the rest of the world, in the rest parts of the world, and ships carrying the goods from the distant countries. These European ships row down the ships begin to carry the goods from the different continents of the world. Understand? Or in this process, distant countries or started arriving in European ports. The ships laden with the goods and laden with the commodities now begin to come to the European ports. Understand? Of the different commodities and the goods. In that process, all along with these ships came the rats. Also, they carried cats. Rats also came along with these commodities and goods. Understand? Or in the European ships, and then they now enter into the Europe. And these deadly bubonic plagues, these rats were the infected with the bubonic plague or infection, and the now that is the called also the Black Death. Understand? This Black Death plague, came into the Europe. How this came? It was the imported, came through the rats which had been the now came with along with the ships. In the ships, these rats had come from the far-flung continents, and then after entered into the Europe and caused the a new and created the infection. These infected rats now began to spread the bubonic plague in the Europe, and the Black Deaths. This is called as the Black Deaths. And then after, the Western Europe relatively isolated in the earlier century, although Western Europe was isolated in the earlier and was hit by the epidemic by the 1347 or 50, this Western Europe hit by this bubonic plague. Bubonic plague. So this was the what? This was a part of the globalization. And at the we are now facing the pandemic, coronavirus. Why? This is the result of our globalization. So that this was the also a globalization of the diseases. Now we have already studied uh, that the how the smallpox was globalized into the America. Understand? And we are the claimed the thousands of the lives of the American who were not immune to the this smallpox. And moreover, we have seen that how the rinderpest, understand, which entered into the Africa and claimed the thousands of or millions of the cattle. Now almost the 90% cattle which were the livestock and the wealth, cattle wealth of the for the Africans. Now understand, 90% now got death. Understand? These were the because why? These were the because of the globalization. Now in the just a globalization. Now the Asian cattle brought to the Africa for this supply of the Italians army. Understand? Meet to the Italians army. Or what happened? This caused a great render pest now, and ultimately disseminated the 90% of the cattle wealth in it. So the bubonic plague was also globalized, we can say. Understand? Or this now claimed the uh, millions of the lives of the life in Europe. Understand? The students, this was the another great disasters or a great crisis of the 14th century Europe. Bubonic plague was that. Okay, students, uh, 40% or now I shall stop it today. Time is over. Next period.